Hello, my name is Travis and I'm with the Antique Bowie Knife Association. We're here in Atlanta for the Blade Show 2022, believe it or not, it's already 2022. I'm with Alan Weinstein. Alan, why don't you explain to us about some of the knives that we have laying on your table right now. Let's start with this smaller one. What classification would you call this knife and where was it made?
This made in England, obviously meant for the United States Civil War with patriotic messages, if you can zoom in. E pluribus unum and liberty for the Union. Just a simple pocket knife, but meant also as a weapon, folding. We call it a dirk because it's double-edged. And but you use a fingernail and you open up and it works as a tool or as a knife, as a pocket knife. Earlier in the 18th century, 19th century, they had big, long, skinny knives. This one's from about 1830. Also folding knife, large, snaps into position. This is primarily meant as a weapon. It's not going to be workable. You're not going to try to cut dinner with it, but it survives for this many years with all three pearls on each side. Very fragile type of machinery.
Let's talk about this knife. How would you compare these two? I noticed like this one has a clip point, little fancier blade and pommel. Looks like both are made of horn, is that correct?
That's correct, both horn, one bias cut, one flat cut, slightly different in appearance. This is more fancy, from more elegant owner, and more of a utilitarian knife. It's more like a conventional pocket knife, but still usable as a weapon with a blade that locks.
Now, would you classify that as a Bowie knife? Because some people think if it has a clip point, it has to be a Bowie knife. So is that a dirk or a Bowie?
More of a Bowie knife with a folding Bowie with a guard. Without the guard, it's not really, in my opinion, a folding Bowie. But with a guard, it becomes a folding Bowie knife. We have a guard, so your hand can't get up on the blade. And this is just fancy, mid-sized. You can carry it in your pocket. You use it to cut your dinner with or somebody that's attacking you. Also very fragile. These get beat up. The pearl falls out. Finding one without the blade tip broken off, very hard to do. They don't survive very well.
All right, tell us about this monster here. I mean, this knife feels like it's got to weigh about 3 to 5 pounds. I mean, this is a monster.
Quite possible. This was clearly meant for the American market. We have an alligator going up the guard and then 2 horse heads, which comes from a Davy Crockett discussion about being half alligator, half horse, a phrase that they use quite often in the South. But this particular knife is actually a folding Bowie knife, typical Bowie blade, massive thickness. You can see by the size of my hand on it how big the knife actually is.
Just compare it to that. I mean, look at the look at the difference there.
A huge piece.
And look at the thicknesses of the blade. This blade is almost like you would find on a fixed Bowie.
Absolutely.
It looks like
it looks like it was a reject from a Bowie. They cut it and made it into a folding knife. Also,
who makes this knife?
This one's made by Samuel Ragg in Sheffield.
What would you date it to?
Oh, I would date this knife to the mid-1840s to possibly the early 1850s.
How rare is this type of guard here?
Extremely. There's probably less than 8 or 10 of them known to exist. And usually they break, they're very fragile. If you look at it in cross-section, the ears break off very, very easily.
Now with this type of guard, is that like, did they cast that or stamp it, or what is it made out of?
That would have been stamped in very thin German silver and then filled with cutler's cement to fill it out and keep it solid. If you see one that's heavy or lead filled, it's incorrect. It's always it's stamped with a male and female mold making machine. And they'll be the same on each side. Rather than mirror
detail
imaging.
on that is incredible. You can even see the teeth of the alligator. I guess it's hard to get that without stamp, right? Casting is impossible almost.
Casting it all becomes blurry. And the swell center, what we Americans now call a Coke bottle shape, but this is way predates the Coke bottle. And very distinct, clearly a Bowie knife. And that's about what we have for folding Bowies on the table today. Hard to find this many. We can open and close. Snaps in place. This one also lock back. Snaps into position. This will do exactly the same thing. A little less strong because it's been used, and that way they stay locked open or closed.
Now, I've got a question for both of you that probably no one knows how to answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. At what point do you think you guys went from being just casual collectors to the experts, obviously, that you are?
Well, I think with me, it comes, I don't know that anybody is an expert because you can't really learn everything. I mean, they've been making these knives for 180 years. Alan's been doing this much longer than me. I probably have, I don't know, maybe at least 2,000 hours in studying this stuff, and I'm still learning. There's still new things you figure out, and the way they're made. Then you see knives that are unmarked, but oh, I recognize this feature, so you compare it with the one that you know, and then you start learning. So I don't know that anybody, obviously compared to most, we would be considered experts, but you're always constantly learning.
We're students of the Bowie knife. I mean, I've been playing with Bowie knives my entire life, one way or another. Every day I learn something. We take a knife home, and we start looking in the books, and we start reading. We start talking to other people about them. It's a constant learning process. And no matter how much you know, there's always something else to learn. And the knives will teach us, but you just got to keep learning.
Right. And there's so many different facets you have to learn. Folding buoys, you have American Bowie knives, you have Sheffield Bowie knives, even some made in London and even in France. And there's just, it's so vast and overwhelming that it just takes a lot to learn it all. But it comes with study because there's a tremendous amount of fakes out there, especially on eBay. There's this one company called Crazy Crow where you should check that website out, where they sell these antique Bowie knife style knives. People are buying these things and faking them up and ripping people off on eBay like crazy. You can buy these knives for $69, then you can find them also on eBay for $1,500, where they've been artificially aged and put fake tank stamps on them.
And that's why we have the Antique Bowie Knife Association, so you can ask questions, have things authenticated, and find if you're spending your money correctly.
That's right.
Knowledge is power.
It really
keeps coming back. Knowledge
and the best way to, you can only learn so much from books. So if you are considering collecting these type of knives, you really need to join that association, and because then you're going to meet and greet. You'll be able to handle antique buoys. If you just start out on your own trying to buy, you're going to get burned.
Until you've handled, according as Bernard Levine says with pocket knives, until you've handled 10,000 pocket knives, you're a novice.
That's right.
Bowie knives, you'll never handle 10,000, but if you've handled 100, you've started to learn something.
Right. And I have an article in Knife Magazine that I wrote that's in, I think, April, and it's called The Novice Bowie Knife Collector, and I explain my experiences starting out as collecting antique buoys. So if any of your watchers are thinking about collecting, you should read that article that I wrote in Knife Magazine.
Absolutely important. Knowledge is power. Don't ever forget it.
Yep.
All right, it's another amazing episode, guys. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
All right.